I never wanted to be a parent. That's the part no one's allowed to say out loud. I didn't want it at 25 or 30 or 35. I agreed because it was time, because it was expected, because saying no would have meant explaining something I didn't fully understand myself. I told myself I'd grow into it, that when the baby came, something would shift. Instinct maybe, love, whatever it is that turns people into mothers and fathers. But nothing shifted. The birth came and all I felt was the end of something. A silence I'd never get back, a space that would never be mine again. And I know what people will say, that it's selfish, that parenthood is sacrifice. But I didn't sign up to be erased. I didn't know that bringing a child into the world meant disappearing from my own. And yes, I went through the motions. I did what I was supposed to do. I held the baby. I took the pictures. I nodded when people said how lucky I was. But inside I was already retreating, not out of hatred, not out of malice, but because something fundamental had broken. My time, my freedom, my sense of self, everything that used to feel like mine was suddenly handed over to someone who didn't ask for it, didn't know what to do with it, and wouldn't remember it anyway. And I know that makes me sound cruel. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just saying what most people are too afraid to admit. Sometimes a child isn't a beginning. Sometimes it's an ending. And once that door closes, there's no getting back what you left on the other side. People always assume something must have gone wrong, that there was trauma or abuse or some tragic failure of love that explains the distance. But there wasn't. My life before the child was quiet, stable, almost textbook. We were two people with matching routines, decent jobs, shared groceries, late dinners with soft music and no rush, no screaming, no slammed doors, no betrayals, just rhythm. And I liked that rhythm. I needed it. It gave me space to breathe without performance, to exist without constant demand. When we decided to have a baby, it wasn't a crisis or an accident. It was a checkbox, a natural next step. Everyone around us was doing it. There was no good reason not to. But I remember sitting on the edge of the bed one night before we tried, staring at the floor and feeling this tightness in my chest I couldn't explain. Not fear, not dread, just a quiet knowing that something irreversible was about to begin. And that I wasn't ready. I never told anyone that. What would I have even said? I don't want this because I like hearing myself think. Because I don't want to be needed every second of every day. Those aren't acceptable answers. So I said nothing. I smiled. I nodded. I agreed. And when the test came back positive, I pretended to feel what I was supposed to feel. But deep down, I felt a door close. Not loudly. Just enough to know it wouldn't open again. And that's the part no one tells you, that you can lose yourself without anything bad happening. You can vanish inside a life that looks perfectly normal, and no one will notice until it's too late. I was good at it. That's the strangest part. From the outside, I played the role almost flawlessly. I held the bottle at the right angle, learned the different cries, memorized feeding schedules, changed diapers in the back seat of the car without complaint. I showed up. I read bedtime stories, packed lunches, sat in pediatric waiting rooms with a calm face. I did everything a parent is supposed to do. People said I was reliable, involved, kind. And maybe I was, in practice. But the feeling never followed. There was no warmth behind the actions, no joy, just a script, a well-rehearsed performance of what care is supposed to look like. And for a while, that was enough. The structure gave me something to grip. There were tasks, and tasks I could do. It made me feel less lost. But every night after the house went quiet, I'd sit in the hallway outside the bedroom door and feel like a stranger, not to the child, to myself, because I was never told that love isn't just doing things. that you can meet every need and still feel hollow, that you can be there in every photo and still be absent. People say, you'll feel it eventually. But what if you don't? What if the switch never flips? What if the part of you that was supposed to open just never does? I thought I was broken, that maybe something in me was missing, but now I think I was just never allowed to ask the question, never allowed to say, what if I'm not made for this? Because once you become a parent, there's no exit without guilt. There's no space for silence. And I lived in that silence for years, polite, capable, numb. There's a thought people are terrified to admit, even to themselves. I carried it quietly for years, like a sharp object wrapped in cloth. I didn't feel connected to the child, not in the way everyone insists is natural, automatic, biological. I looked at this small person and saw someone whose entire world depended on me, and instead of warmth, I felt distance, a kind of detachment I couldn't reason away. Everyone said, they're a part of you, but they didn't feel like a part of me. They felt like a separate, unfamiliar life that had been placed in my hands without asking who I was or whether I could hold it. People talk about children inheriting your features, your laugh, your temper. But when I watched them move, speak, grow, all I saw were pieces of someone else. Their rhythms weren't mine. Their needs weren't mine. Their future had nothing to do with the life I once imagined for myself. And the worst part was realizing how invisible that truth is. You can stand in the middle of your own home and feel like a visitor. You can share a roof, meals, routines, and still feel like you're watching someone else's story unfold. I tried to force the feeling. I tried to convince myself that connection would come with time, with effort, with years, but nothing changed. The child kept becoming more themselves, and I kept becoming less myself. And the quiet truth I never spoke was this: they weren't a continuation of me. They were a continuation of the decision I agreed to against my better judgment. I was just the one who happened to be standing close when that decision took shape. That's the part no one wants to hear, because it unravels the myth we cling to, that love is guaranteed simply by blood. It isn't, and pretending it is only makes the silence deeper. People get angry when you say things like this. They hear it as rejection, as cruelty, as some sort of moral failure. But what they don't understand is that this isn't about love versus hate. It's about something quieter, something harder to name. It's about the gap between who you're told you'll become and who you actually are when the weight of responsibility settles. People romanticize parenthood so much that they can't imagine indifference being anything other than violence. They believe that the moment you hold your child, something awakens: instinct, devotion, purpose, and maybe it does for them. But for me, it didn't awaken anything. It only revealed how much of my life had been built on assumptions that weren't mine. I think that's why this truth sits like a stone in my chest. Not because it's ugly, but because it feels forbidden. Everyone loves to talk about unconditional love, about sacrifice, about how children give life meaning. But no one asks what happens to the ones for whom that meaning never arrives. No one wonders what becomes of the people who wake up every day and perform love like a routine, hoping it will eventually become real. You can do everything right. The doctor visits, the late-night feedings, the school meetings, the birthday candles, and still feel like a ghost in your own house. And ghosts make people uncomfortable. They want to believe you're heartless. They want to believe you didn't try. They want to believe you're defective, because it's easier than accepting that some truths sit outside the narratives we build for ourselves. There were moments, small ones, when I thought maybe the feeling was close, a laugh that caught me off guard, A quiet afternoon when the house was unusually still, a soft hand in mine during a crowded street. But those moments passed through me like light through glass. Nothing stayed, nothing rooted. I existed around the child, not with them, and I hated myself for that. Not enough to change, not enough to magically become someone else, just enough to notice the distance every day, enough to feel the strain of pretending, because pretending is its own kind of exhaustion. You start shaping your whole personality around what's required: patience, gentleness, interest, and people praise you for it. They say you're steady, responsible, loving. They don't hear the hollowness behind your voice. They don't see the way you watch yourself from the outside, adjusting, correcting, performing. And here's the part that angers people the most. I think many feel the same and will never admit it. I think there are parents walking through their lives with a quiet ache they can't name. They follow the script because stepping outside it feels like betrayal, not of the child but of the identity they've spent years building. We talk about instinct as if it's universal. We talk about love as if it's guaranteed. But what if it isn't? What if parenthood is a role some people wear like a heavy coat, something that keeps out the cold but never really fits their skin? The world doesn't allow that question. It doesn't allow the possibility that the bond might not appear, that the feeling might not grow, that love might not be automatic. So people stay silent. They fear being judged, labeled, cast out. They fear being misunderstood. They fear that one honest sentence could unravel their entire life. And I understand that fear better than anyone, because I lived inside it for years. I shaped my days around what was expected. I ticked every box. I didn't miss the recitals, or the school plays, or the parent-teacher nights. I made sure birthdays were celebrated and pictures were taken and routines were followed. But none of it made me feel like a parent. It made me feel like a caretaker of a life I hadn't chosen, a responsible witness, a participant in something that was supposed to change me but never did. And the longer I lived in that truth, the heavier it became. Not because it hurt others, though I'm sure it did in ways I'll never fully understand, but because it forced me to confront something I wasn't prepared to see, that I had misunderstood myself all along. I had built an identity on expectations I never questioned. I had assumed I would transform, that the feeling would grow, that the connection would arrive like a season. And when it didn't, I didn't know where to put the emptiness. So I carried it quietly, carefully, like contraband thought, like something dangerous that would get me punished if anyone saw it too clearly. And maybe they would have. Because no one wants to hear that a child didn't fill your life, that they hollowed it. No one wants to hear that sometimes parenthood doesn't open you, it closes you. No one wants to hear that love is not a guarantee, not even for the people you bring into the world. But I'm saying it now, because silence never changed anything. And because this truth has been sitting inside me for years, waiting for a place to finally exist outside my own head. I used to think it was just a phase, that the disconnect would fade once the child got older, once we could talk, once there was less noise and more structure. I told myself I was just overwhelmed, that once the chaos of diapers and tantrums passed, I'd finally find my rhythm. But it didn't pass. It just changed shape. The child grew, learned to speak, learned to reason, learned to mirror the world around them. And I still felt like I was watching someone else's life happen. Every milestone became another marker in someone else's timeline. First words, first steps, first day of school. I was there, I took the pictures, I wrote the dates down. But I wasn't in any of it. Not really. I was just standing beside a story that I couldn't enter. People always say that children are the most meaningful part of life, that once you become a parent, you'll understand what really matters. And for a while, I believed that too, or tried to. I kept waiting for the shift, for that deep, soul-warming sense of purpose that everyone talks about. But it never came. What came instead was maintenance, schedules, meals, drop-offs, pickups, managing moods, balancing demands. And beneath all of it, a dull, persistent awareness that I wasn't building something. I was surviving something. I wasn't nurturing a bond. I was performing a role. And no matter how well I played that role, it never made me feel closer, just more invisible. I think the love I felt for my partner made it easier to pretend. There was warmth there, genuine and steady, and I leaned on it more than I admitted. We were a team. We moved in sync. I trusted her instincts when I couldn't find my own, and she trusted that I was with her, even when I wasn't fully in it. Maybe she saw it, maybe she didn't, but she never asked. Or maybe she knew better than to ask. There's a kind of silence that keeps things from falling apart, and I clung to that silence like a lifeline. I thought if I could just keep everything moving, pay the bills, show up on time, act interested, then the truth wouldn't matter. But truth doesn't dissolve just because you ignore it. It waits, quietly, until there's no more space left to contain it. I loved my child in a way that made sense to others. I protected them. I provided. I kept them safe. But it always felt like I was standing one step removed, like there was a pane of glass between us. I saw their joy, their curiosity, their anger, their fear. But I never felt it with them. I responded correctly. I said the right things. But the emotional thread that was supposed to tie us together never tightened. It frayed instead. I knew what they needed from me. I just didn't know how to give it from a place that was real. And the older they got, the more they felt it. Not in words. Children don't always name things, but in the small shifts. The way they looked to their mother first. The way their hugs started to feel more polite than spontaneous. The way their questions got shorter. The way they stopped lingering in the doorway. And that's where the ache began. Not guilt. I don't think I've earned even that. Just ache. This quiet, impossible ache for something I never really built, but still had to watch fade, because the world doesn't wait for you to catch up emotionally. Children grow whether you're ready or not. They become people, sharp, funny, wounded, beautiful people, and they don't pause to give you another chance. They carry forward the version of you they received, and you carry the version of them you never managed to fully let in. That's the part that stays with me, not the mistakes. Those are too easy to name. Not the missed opportunities. Those blur with time. What stays is the dull realization that I was never fully there. Not because I was absent in body, but because I was absent in presence. And now, all I have is memory, but not the kind people cherish. Mine are technical, procedural, framed like surveillance footage. I remember packing lunches. I remember fixing a broken bike. I remember setting the alarm clock early for field trips. But I don't remember connection. I don't remember laughter that shook me. I don't remember looking at my child and feeling something catch in my chest. I just remember keeping things functional, safe, on track. And maybe that sounds like love, but it never felt like it. Not to me. So when people talk about grandchildren and how they bring a second chance, how they awaken something deep and ancient, I feel nothing. Not because I'm cold. Not because I don't care, but because the part of me that might have come alive in their presence never survived the first time. It withered quietly during the years I spent performing. It faded behind the routines. It cracked under the weight of pretending. So when I hold them, I smile, I speak gently. I ask the questions, but it's all borrowed. The real version of me is still sitting somewhere behind that pane of glass, watching a life he never truly entered, wondering how much of himself he lost by trying to be someone he was never meant to be. There's a kind of fear that doesn't come with panic. It comes with stillness, with quiet mornings and closed doors, with knowing finally that nothing outside you can fix what you never found inside. I live with that fear now, not of punishment, not of judgment. Those came and went in softer waves, in glances from family, in moments when I knew they sensed the distance but didn't dare name it. No, the fear I carry now is deeper. It's the fear of permanence, of having passed through an entire life without ever learning how to feel what others seem to arrive with naturally. It's the fear that I will die this way, not bitter, not angry, but unfinished. Like a house that was always under construction, but never built to be lived in. I used to believe that if I didn't speak it, it wouldn't be real. That if I kept it buried, if I just kept moving, no one would notice how absent I was behind the motions. I told myself silence was kindness, that naming the emptiness would only cause pain. But now I see it wasn't kindness. It was avoidance. It was fear dressed up as restraint. Because the truth is, I was terrified. Terrified of what it meant to say, I don't feel what I'm supposed to feel. Terrified of what it meant to admit that I was more comfortable in solitude than in connection, that I understood order more than I understood intimacy, that I was better at fixing broken hinges than holding broken people, and terrified above all that if I ever stopped pretending, if I ever truly said it aloud, I would have nothing left to protect myself from what I lacked. So I stayed silent. I let time do the explaining for me. I let relationships harden into logistics, into schedules, into polite habits. I let people think I was just quiet, just private, just steady. But it wasn't quiet. It was absence. It wasn't privacy. It was distance. And it wasn't steadiness. It was paralysis. I thought if I just kept going, the feeling would catch up. That one day, I'd look at my child or my grandchild and something would break open, but nothing broke, nothing moved. The years passed like fog over a frozen field. Things changed, but I didn't thaw. I adapted, I adjusted, I aged, but I didn't warm. And now I sit in a house that is mine, full of things I've kept in good condition. The floorboards don't creak, the pipes don't leak, the light switches all work. I maintained everything, except myself, except the part of me that was supposed to know how to reach out, how to soften, how to say I love you, and mean it in a way that didn't sound like obligation. And the longer I stayed silent, the harder it became to even imagine speaking. Because people build stories around your silence. They call you dependable, wise. They say you're just not emotional, that you show love in other ways, and you let them. Because it's easier than tearing down the only version of you they trust. But I think about death now, not dramatically, not fearfully, just pragmatically. I'm close enough to it that I can feel its shape in the corner of the room. And the fear isn't that I'll die alone. I've lived alone, even when surrounded by others. That part doesn't scare me. What scares me is the idea that I'll leave without ever being known. That there will be no trace of the person who sat behind the gestures. That the people I raised, the people I smiled at, the people I handed gifts to, they'll never know who I really was because I never gave them a chance. I never let them close. I don't even know if I could have. I've rehearsed distance for so long, I don't remember how to do anything else. There's a part of me that wants to say something, even now, even this late. Something simple, something like, I wish I'd known how. But I don't, because I'm not sure it would help. I'm not sure it would reach anyone. I think some truths rot when they're said too late, not because they aren't real, but because they have nowhere to land. The people you needed to tell are older now. They've shaped their lives around what you didn't give them. They carry their own versions of the story, and your truth, when finally spoken, just sounds like a correction, like a footnote, like something meant to ease your own conscience, not theirs. So I stay quiet, but not in the same way I did before. Not with avoidance, with awareness, with presence. I sit in the silence now and I let it echo. I let it name me. I let it hold up the mirror I've been avoiding for decades. And what I see isn't cruel. It isn't evil. It isn't broken. It's just someone who never learned how to be open. Someone who mistook responsibility for love, who confused structure with connection, who lived inside a life of functions and forgot to inhabit the feelings that were supposed to fill them. And that's what I'm most afraid of carrying into the grave. Not regret, not shame, but the unbearable weight of having almost lived. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I wouldn't know what to do with it if it came. I'm not asking to be understood either. That would require a closeness I never earned. I'm not here to make peace with the past or to wrap this up with some graceful wisdom about life and time and healing. I don't believe in any of that, not anymore. I believe in what's left, in the chair I sit in the quiet I finally stopped fighting, in the truth that no longer needs to hide beneath performances and polite silences. I'm saying this because it's the only thing I haven't done. I've lived a life of showing up, of fixing what could be fixed, of pretending that presence was enough. I spent decades wearing a version of myself that fit the expectations, but not the shape of who I really was. And now, near the end, I take it off. Not to start again, just to stop pretending. I won't reach out to them. I won't call to explain. That would only be another performance, another attempt to shape how I'm remembered. And I don't want to be remembered for anything I say now. I want the truth to exist without a defense. I want it to sit, plain and unsoftened. I didn't love being a parent. I didn't feel joy in the role. I did it because I was supposed to, and I did it well enough to not be questioned. But I never belonged inside it. I never felt the connection people described, and now that it's over, I realize I waited my entire life for something that never arrived. I won't leave a letter. I won't write a note. I won't give anyone the burden of this confession. It's not theirs to carry, it's mine. Just like the silence was, just like the emptiness, just like this strange final clarity that comes when the world no longer expects anything of you. If you're still listening, it means something in you paused. Something in you recognized the shape of what I said, even if you don't agree with it, even if it makes you uncomfortable. And maybe that's enough, not to change anything, not to undo what's already lived, but to let this truth exist outside my chest for the first and only time. I won't say goodnight. I won't sign off with hope or redemption. I'll just stop here. The light is fading. The house is still. And for the first time, it feels like the silence is mine. Not because I have nothing left to say, but because I've finally said it.